And Michael, you're good to go.
So good evening again. I am a bit under the weather, so I'm going to have my mic muted as much as I can so I don't cough or sneeze at you. But luckily we're not live, so I shouldn't be able to share my germs with you. Throughout our time together, as Abby said, I'm going to ask you to put some things into the chat, but do also feel free to put questions into the chat. One thing that I would ask, if you are putting a question into the chat box, please put a Q at the beginning of it, so that way we can quickly scan the chat view and find any of the questions, because you'll have started them with a Q. There is a Google folder that I listed the URL for it on this first introductory slide. So you're welcome to go to that Google folder and get a copy of this presentation, and also you're welcome to read some references that I have there. Last thing that I'd like to ask is that now that we've done the introductions, I'd like you to also very quickly type what you hope to learn by being here today. So I'll give you about a minute or two to put this into the chat box so that I can see what you all are hoping to get out of this evening's time together. Please note you do not need to use full sentences, phrases, and a few words here or there will be fine. We'll take about another 30 seconds. So let's take a look at some brands of companies. I wonder if any of you can name all 6, although there's actually 7. I added one this afternoon. I'd like you to think about those brands and then take a moment and pick one of them to think about some questions. What is the company known for? How do you know that's what the company is known for? And how did they build this understanding? And what I'd love to have you do then is, again, go back into the chat window, or feel free to take your microphone off mute if you'd like to comment to everyone, and give me some ideas about one or more of these companies. So it would be great if you would use the 2.1, 2.2, and things like that to help people to know what part of the question you are responding to. This should only take us about 2 minutes. So feel free to someone jump in on the microphone, and others to type as quickly as you can.
Well, I mean, McDonald's has saturated the market, and I guess 2.1, they're known for quick food, easy to get food, very convenient, And I know 2.2 because they've saturated the entire market, and I guess they built that understanding through quantity.
Thanks, Terry.
Yep.
Someone else? Another of the brands?
I can speak for Toyota because I have one on my steering wheel that I look at every day. Of course, I know the company because I see their advertisements all the time. I've driven one for a lot of time, and I think all of them sort of have totally saturated the market. So I mean, you just see them all the time, and you just know automatically what they are without them saying a word. And I think that can speak for 2.2 and 2.3.
Thank you. Any guesses as to which one I added today and why I added it today?
I would guess that you added Facebook today because they've been in the news.
Sorry, I lost you all for a moment. So Jason, were you saying Facebook because it's been reused?
Yeah.
That is the one I added because we may want to think about some of the things that have come up over the last week or so and how it might affect their brand. So we're moving on to the why. Why do companies work on developing their brand? What happens if the brand changes? And then the Facebook issue, what happens to the brand if the company makes a mistake or there is a problem? Again, feel free to add things to the chat or also come on, unmute microphones, and let's have a conversation.
I think you see changes happen all the time if you look far enough. I think a great example would be Kentucky Fried Chicken, when years ago they changed their branding to KFC to kind of get away from that that idea of fried, to seem a little bit healthier. They didn't change anything with their food. They just changed their presentation in an effort to
Great point.
I think companies work on
Someone
developing.
else?
I think companies work on developing their brand to make money, to spread the word. You know, the more things they have with their logo on it, the more familiar people are with it.
Thanks, Terry. Anyone else? My goal is that by the end of tonight, all of you will either have volunteered through the microphone or through the chat box to give us some ideas. Actually, Kathleen just posted in chat about JCPenney, and that's another example of something that they tried that didn't work, and what steps did they take when that happened to try to fix it? As I recall, maybe they had refocused and did advertising, perhaps more advertising than they'd done before, to try to say, look, more or less, we made a mistake and we're going to try to fix it now. Actually, Samsung was on that company slide because of the phones that were catching on fire. And right at that moment, they had some issues with their brand. But since that time, they seem like they have been able to rebuild the consumer's trust in it too. So it's a lesson for us all that no matter what bad things may happen, there are ways of being intentional to rebuild what you're trying to rebuild and to help people to see you the way you want your company, yourself, your band, or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So what about teachers? Do schools or districts have brands, teachers, or ensembles? And why does it matter? So a mascot is one possibility.
I also think that there are some school districts that are known for certain things. Like some school districts, you know, have really great football teams, or some school districts have, you know, world-class this or world-class that type of thing.
I think you see districts branding themselves more and more anymore now that we all have websites. If you go to any school district's website, it really is an advertisement for their district.
And there's some people typing some things in the chat too that are helping us to find some of these things that help groups build. Sorry, I seem to have lost all of you once again. So there was a comment also about Abby, help me out with the chat because I've lost my chat window for a moment.
Oh no.
What was something the last person or two had written?
The slogan. The school district has a slogan, every student, every
Yes,
day.
the slogan.
And the other
So
person,
while the district says that's their slogan, yes, go ahead, Abby.
oh, sorry, just the other one was that the football team's been to a state championship 2 years in a row.
So success does breed success. If you have had your football team win a championship, it's going to definitely help their brand. But what about the slogan? we think that when a school or a school district adopts a slogan, does everyone buy into it?
No, not necessarily.
Well, I can speak for our slogan. It was really nothing that we voted on. It just showed up one day, and it showed up on all of our letterhead, and the school district had a sign that was printed out in front of the office, and so we're all like, oh, I guess this is the way it's going to be. So it's sort of like, this is what it is, and this is what our commitment is. So that's what we were told.
So I guess maybe they were hoping to brand it by putting it everywhere. Although when there's no buy-in to it in a group, it's tough to buy into it if you're told this is what the slogan is. So a few of you who were talking about in the chat earlier about you want to help build your music department or a specific ensemble, the implication for that suggests to me that you may need feedback from your students or from the other teachers if it's your music department to be sure that what you are thinking the brand is going to be is what they think the brand should be. And we'll come back to that in a moment or two. So some examples, and one is the tradition of excellence. My district has been blessed to have a great reputation for music education and the arts in general. Whenever the board has difficulty finding money, they make a list of everything they could possibly cut, and then they take music off right away because no one has any interest in cutting it. We've used the NAM Foundation's Best Communities for Music Education. We've been named to that list 7 years in a row. The board loves that we've been named to it. So it helps us to have this tradition between the outside recognition and people who come to our concerts and are amazed at what our teachers and students can do. Another is sort of the personal brand of the music teacher or the ensembles. So for instance, in my district, you may have people like this too. If the superintendent comes to me and says, hey, Mike, I need some musicians for an event in a week, I have 2 teachers who will make that happen no matter, as long as they have at least a week, sometimes even less than that. Whether they should need to do that or not, I try to help the superintendent, and our newer superintendent doesn't do that quite as frequently. She usually has about a month or 2 notice. But I know 2 of my teachers, that's part of their brand. You need something, we're here to help. We can get the people together. Another piece has to do with relationships with students. And so we probably all, when we were growing up, had the teacher that you fear. And you also probably all had the teacher who was incredibly engaging and very little fear. And so they had built those brands, whether deliberately or not, through the things that they did. And so one of the questions is, where is our brand now? How do we know that's our brand? And will we be interested in taking some steps to work on it? We'll continue that in a moment. But I want you to think about for a moment the brands of people that you know in your school or in your music department. Do you have people who are building a tradition of excellence? Do you have people who step up to do whatever's needed? Do you have teachers who work through fear or through joy and love of their kids? Do you have some who seem to know everything that's going on and are happy to share with everyone in a positive way what's going on in the community, in the school, and other such places? So take a moment to think. Feel free, if you want to add your voice to the conversation, to do that in the microphone or the chat. But do take a moment to think about the brands of people that you already have in your situations. So where do you stand? What is your current brand? If it's not you, it could be your music department, it could be your band, it could be your general music class. How do you know that that's what your current brand is? What do you want your brand to be? And how do you know that that's what you want it to be? This we will take about 3 or 4 minutes to have a conversation. So please feel free to jump in through the microphone or through the chat box.
I guess it's kind of hard to answer because like I think I have a picture of what my brand would be, but I really can't answer 6.2 what everybody else thinks my brand is. Like I don't know how I would know what they think.
So that's interesting, Terry, because I must say for many years of my life and career, I did not really think about my brand either. And yet, when I became interested in my brand and researching about how people build their brand, discovered that I built a fairly solid brand without trying. I kind of lucked into it. And the way I knew what my brand was people would tell me. So I became an acting elementary school principal at the start of a school year a few years ago because we needed someone to do that. And the superintendent said, Mike can get up to speed on everything quickly, so he should be the principal to start the year while we find someone. And so it's been through people telling me what my brand is that I've discovered sort of what I'm known for. That leads, though, to the question, if you don't know what other people think your brand is, what could you do to try to figure that out?
I think part of it is what is your vision for your program, your overall vision, and that's a pretty big concept.
Absolutely. Kathleen posted to chat that she's done Google form surveys to parents and students. That's definitely a way to find out about the reputation and the brand that your organization has by doing a survey for students and parents. Going back to the previous piece, I wonder when you do those surveys, are you looking at sort of the big picture, what is the vision, or are you looking more at the smaller details about the program? Because you might get different feedback depending on the level of the questions. Six 6.3 is probably what most of you were writing at the beginning. What do you want your brand to be? So like we want more people to know about us. We want to develop excellence in the program or things like that. But I keep coming back to 6.4. If you're an ensemble director and you want to make your band develop a tradition of excellence, as someone said earlier about the school district that just started posting a slogan everywhere, that felt heavy-handed. So perhaps as an ensemble director, you need to have at least some of your key students, if not all of your students, help you to figure out what the brand should be, or how you're going to get there. It's interesting, I watched some marching bands in the fall, and one in particular for years, whenever they're called to attention, they yell "with pride." And then you see a couple kids who are not really standing at attention, even though they said "with pride." So my question is, do the students completely get that, what that means when they're going through that response? And how can they help their students to buy into it? Anything else on this before we go to the next caution? So there's some things to keep in mind when you're planning what your brand should be. One is to be authentic. So if you say that you're all about, let's say you say that your goal is that you are about helping every kid to reach his or her potential, and then you're not encouraging all kids to play music, are you living up to what you said you were trying to do? Facebook, with its most recent challenges, some would argue they haven't been overly authentic because they represented what they do as one thing, and yet it turns out that they're really gathering a whole lot of data and sharing it without letting their users know. So they're going to have to figure out how to come up with a way to build on their authenticity. Another part is be yourself. It's somewhat similar to being authentic, but if you decide that you want to be known as a really high energy teacher, and you aren't a high energy person, you may find that you aren't being yourself, and therefore it may not go over that well. So as you think about the your brand, think about who you really are, what your group is really like, and then be realistic. And finally, be vulnerable. And I say that because there are times when you're going to get information that you don't want to get. So if you ask your best friend, be honest with me, what says, we know you as someone who comes too late work every day. That's good information for you, but hopefully you accept it in a vulnerable state of, this is how I'm being seen. If you survey your students, if you survey your parents, the understanding that how they view what you've done, how they view what the brand of your program is, may not match what you think. And so, again, it's giving you lots of data to try to figure out how you can take specific steps to fix that. So in the somewhat ridiculous scenario of your friend who tells you your brand is that you come to school late every day, so clearly the way of trying to learn from that would be start showing up on time. But again, watch these cautions, because many times people start to build their brand and they build their brand sort of in a silo without the real life making connections to what it actually could be. So the work that I'd like us to work on is this you don't need to share right at the moment, but I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to puzzle through this, and I'd ask that you jot this down ideally, or on a computer, on a device, on paper, someplace, because for most people, jotting things down will help them to remember it. And I want you to, when we finish today, have some concrete steps that you're going to take to help you as you are working on your brand. So again, I won't read these to you from the screen, but take about 5 minutes, think about them, and jot down some of your ideas. We'll talk about them in a few. as you think about the intentional steps that you will take to start moving your brand towards what you want it to be, think about the things we talked about earlier with the, there's Toyota logos everywhere, McDonald's, you turn the corner, there's a McDonald's. So the frequency and hearing, websites that make it easier for people to find information, coming up with a logo or a phrase that people are using a lot. I do ask, though, that you limit yourself to no more than 3, because if you come up with too many steps, you're unlikely to actually take any of them. If you come up with 1 or 2 really strong steps, you're more likely to actually do those steps and start to move towards what you want to do. Again, I'll give you another minute and a half or so to think about this. So we'll take about a minute or 2 to have people quickly share some of their intentional steps. This could be either in the chat window or again through the microphone. And if you can, include the why that you chose those steps that you will consider. Be brave. So Robert put into chat about increasing online exposure, and he has his why there. That sounds like a good idea. Jason wrote about helping families to realize that keeping music, in parentheses band, as part of high school is just as important or more than other courses. And so one of, Jason, your challenges is going to be to figure out how you can help the families to realize that. Kathleen replied to Robert about the public Facebook page. That can work well. Hopefully Facebook does not completely implode, because for the uses like this of public pages to let people share information, that's something Facebook does very well. Apparently not for Robert, though. I know my art teachers have a public Facebook page for their art program. Any other ideas in terms of intentional steps that you're considering? So some things to consider with social media or blogs. What do your posts say about you, and what do posts about you say? So if you're considering Facebook, some people leave wide open the commenting feature, and so that can be a good thing, but it also can mean that people who have some challenges with what you're doing may comment negatively on Facebook. And so you can get yourselves into some challenges with what are, what negative things might people post that are going to impact the brand that you're trying to build. Same thing could happen with tweets. And then also important is in person. So how do you represent yourself to friends or strangers, professors, or potential future colleagues? And so I guess the question is, let's say you're trying to build the commitment of your families to band. In what ways do you build relationships with those families? Are you able to get those families to come out to events at your school, to your concerts? Do you have information nights or other such things? Do you and or others like the parent groups or the boosters, do they reach out to parents to try to help them feel connected? Do your band kids reach out to the new band kids to try to help build community that will help to build that brand, help the students to understand what they are becoming part of? There are no perfect answers to those things, but I can assure you that if you have ninth graders coming into your high school orchestra, for instance, and the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade orchestra kids ignore them and put them down because they can't play as well as the older kids, that's not going to be a particularly positive situation. So it's, for these bottom 2 points, how can you get not just you, but your kids, your leaders in your program, your parent leaders and such to help you? Questions or comments? Kathleen posted a really good idea where she has older kids who will be helping with an after-school practice club for her younger kids. That's an excellent idea for helping to build the sense of community. And I bet your elementary kids are going to know what the brand of your 7th through 12th grade program is, because they'll have been working with the students who are reflecting that. I guess a question would be, have you talked with your 7th through 12th grade students to make sure that they are thinking about the types of things they should be doing that will help to build that brand that you're looking for, and the types of things that maybe you want to discourage them from doing that might not lead your brand moving to where you want to go? Samuel talks about the Tri-M Society that's taking on service projects, and that's another great way of helping to unite a K-12 music program. I must say that in the programs that I know that tend to be very successful, in many cases they are successful K-12, not just high school band or not just elementary general music, but trying to really understand and put into practice that whatever the weakest link is going to bring down the whole group. So trying to build the everyone up. When I was in high school years ago, our choir director and orchestra director had very good relationships. The band director, not so much. He was new one year, and he sort of fought against the orchestra and choral person, and really did damage to the brand at the high school. So luckily, they figured out how to fix that. So when I was in college and kept in touch with the music teachers, they were working to take specific steps to try to rebuild that unity. Because again, unity helps. Unity, if you see it as a common purpose. So it goes back to also how do you get everyone to be on the same page for your vision? So we don't have many people who identify themselves as college students. So we won't spend too much time on this slide unless there are people who want to jump in on any of these, either of these two things. Well, since this is being recorded, there could be college students who come back to look at this later. So if any of you have really good ideas for this, feel free to jump in, but we'll take only about a minute or two here. So for future college or for current college students who may watch this in the future, or who may be the silent people in our room with us, clearly it's about building your brand while you're still in college. There are some articles that suggest that really high school kids should be learning to build their brand, because their brand is what's going to get them into the college that they are trying to get into. And so there's suggestions that high school kids should be thinking about how to build their brand so they get into college, and while in college they're building their brand so that they can continue to be who they want to be and make sure that they don't get sidetracked on the way. The implications once you have a job would be that you need to keep being who you were. So if in your interview you said, I'm a really engaging teacher who's positive all the time, make sure you're still positive all the time, even if you're having first year issues, because the last thing your principal or supervisor is going to want to see is that you got the job saying one thing and then you're a completely different person later. So let's continue then with this idea about students and personal brands. And what ways can we help students learn about personal brands? What ways can we align their perception of the brands of our ensembles to music classes to our own? And how do we know when we've been successful? We're going to take probably about 4 or 5 minutes, so please feel free to chat in the chat box or come off mute and share with your voices. So let's start with the first one. In what ways can we help students learn about personal brands? So we have some ideas coming in on chat. Both of those are good ideas. One of the things that is interesting is we can be a role model. We can sort of live up to the brand, but one thing we might consider is also being explicit about what we're doing. So we might talk with our students about, here's my personal brand, or here's what I think our band's brand is, and have them think about what are the things that you do, what are the things the band does that helps other people to know that that's what the brand is, that that's what the reputation is. So as Jason put in chat, helping students know the expectations so that way they are helping to project that image or that brand that you're looking for. So what if we have students who don't see the brand the same way that we do? How can we help align their perception of the brand to our own? Great point from Jason that it's most effective if it's older students teaching the younger ones. Whenever your students can be the ones who are helping you do the work, students are much more likely to buy into other students' beliefs. Going back to the post from much earlier, another way we can try to learn that is by questioning the students through a survey or by asking your officers of your choir to give you some feedback. Ask them how they know what the perception of the rest of the group is, and then ask them what steps they could take to help to build that alignment if you find that there isn't alignment between them. They can be those older students who are helping to convince the youngers, or the leaders helping to convince the rest of the group. We can also think back to the dreaded course evaluations that we took when we take graduate classes or undergraduate classes, and think about, and I must say, I teach a graduate class. I love the course evaluations. I actually ask my students to do 3-question reflections every week because I want to see what they're thinking, so that way I can jump in and help redirect them the moment that there are concerns. So I wonder if there are ways that we could, whether it's within our music department, so work with other music teachers, within ensembles, so working with our kids, to find ways of having informal conversations or more formal conversations. I don't know if any of you do tickets out the door, but that would be another way to gather some feedback. Rather than having them all be content-based, would be to ask, how are you feeling about the band? What do you think the band's brand is? How can we improve the band's brand? How can we get the community to buy into the hard work that you are doing. And actually, that's similar to what Doug was also saying. Help them to see that they're part of something bigger. And so they're representing not just something inside the band room, but looking at it beyond the band room. Goes back to the question or the comment about the band and trying to help kids to see that, or helping families to realize that keeping music, band as part of their high school experience is just as important than any other course they could choose to take. So how do we communicate that to our families? And is it really helping our students to learn about the lifelong benefits and helping our families to learn about the lifelong benefits through their students and their students' own work? Any other last ideas about this? We have about 6 minutes and we're right on time, so life is good. So it's time for you all to make a commitment. I'd like you to post at least one of these, and yes, I'd like all of you to post at least one of these. It's either one item that's most important to remember and how will you remember it, a specific step you will be doing and when you will complete it by, and a method that you might use this to introduce the concept of a personal brand or an ensemble brand to your students. Again, I want one specific thing. I want you to type this in so you're committing to all of us that your time today has not just been to spend it with a bunch of music educators, but that you're going to commit to a step that you're. I'll give you about 2 minutes. Feel free to also jump in with the microphone. I want to see that the chat board light up with lots of posts. Thank you, Robert. Great idea, Daniel. Absolutely, Kathleen. So one thing, if you are doing a Facebook page, just make sure that in light of the recent Facebook things that have happened, that your district does not have a policy against having a Facebook page for classes. But otherwise, a Facebook page or maybe some other web presence would be great. Brittany, that would tie in great to what your school is looking to do. Wow, a live stream. Very cool. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with GRIT as a educational sort of famous word at the moment. But one of the things that's interesting is some of the research about the whole idea of helping kids to push through something is that it's trying to get kids to delay instant gratification to aim for a goal. And so one of the things that has intrigued me about building a brand is if you build your brand because you know what your goal is, then maybe you're going to delay instant gratification so that you can get there. And so I wonder if goal setting is another way that we can try to help our students or our music programs or our ensembles get where we want to go. If our music department comes together and says, we really want the goal of increasing participation across our district, and get everyone in the department believing that that's what they want to do, wonder if those common goals could help a group of professionals or help a group of kids to be able to commit and sort of put aside some of the other things that might happen to go for the long-term goal. I do have one more non-ticket out the door. In the bottom left corner of this last slide, I'd like some feedback. I'd like you to type one word or phrase in the chat box that best sums up your experience in today's webinar. I also put a link directly to the references page that's at the top. It's within the Google Drive that was also there. So I welcome you to visit the Google form. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I do tend to do a whole lots of things, but they are all interconnected in my life and help to make me the person that I am. So I thank you for being here. Abby, I don't know if you want to say something, but I do appreciate your feedback and your participation, and good luck and best wishes on trying to make your brand what you want it to be.
Thanks so much, Mike. No, I think that was fantastic. And yeah, just again, we'll send out a follow-up email with the Act 48 survey information and a link to the recording too, so you can go back and reference this at any time. So thanks again, Mike. I really appreciate it. And I thank you all
Absolutely.
for attending. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks, Abby. Thanks.